Howdy, people of the internet. It's me again, Will. So today we're going to be taking a look at the tragic murders of the four Idaho college students out of Moscow, Idaho. So many people have reached out to me over the course of the last 7.5 weeks since this tragic crime took place, seeing if there was anything that I knew that could help them gain some kind of peace of mind, some kind of understanding to why somebody would do something like this. Well, let's go ahead and jump into it and see if we can answer some of those questions for you today. The number one question that so many people have asked me is, was Bryan Kohberger targeting these individuals, or was he watching one of the nearby homes? I don't know. And the law enforcement, most likely at this point, unless he's talking to them, don't know either. He has no direct connection to any of these students. He never dated any of them. He never had any of them as friends. They went to completely different universities. Bryan Kohberger went to Washington State University, which is approximately 8 miles from the University of Idaho, Moscow campus. They didn't socialize in the same circles. From what everyone says about Bryan Kohberger, he was an awkward individual. He didn't socialize much and was highly stressed because he was in the grad student program where that took up a vast majority of his time. So even passing, in a hallway or passing each other on campus was almost impossible that it would have happened. So how did he find them and why did he? We just don't know the answer right now. And down the road, if he is to confess to some point to the entire thing, we have to take his confession with a grain of salt. As we know from statistics, from serial killers, mass killers, and spree killers, when they do give a confession, it's more grandiose than anything at all, but it leaves out important factual evidence that everybody wants to know. Why? Why did you do it? And why did you pick this day and these victims? They almost never answer that, if they can at all. Now, I want to answer a question about mistakes that Bryan Kohberger made when he committed these crimes, and if these mistakes are symptoms that he has committed crimes like this before. Because so many people want to know. Because we know statistically from in reading the information and studying the information from the Department of Justice and from the FBI that when it comes to homicide, people don't just jump directly into committing homicide. They usually commit smaller crimes and work their way up to committing homicide. Do we know of any other crimes that Bryan may have committed before in the past? Right now, checking his criminal history in Washington State and in Idaho, there is none. And as far as the news has been able to ungather from back home where his parents live, they have no crimes listed where he was either a suspect or was arrested or even questioned in connection to a crime. So, had he committed other crimes and just gotten away with it? Is there anything else that matches this MO in the Moscow or Washington State University area, Pullman, Cornell, Colfax, going down to other state line or up to, the Boise area or down? Is there anywhere that matches an MO like this? Well, the answer is there are crimes that are similar, but nothing that matches this exact MO. So it does not look like he committed any other murders leading up to it, but it does not exonerate him from any other possible crimes. Peeping Tom, voyeurism, maybe he was into some type of other release. We don't know. There's more questions. I understand there's more questions right now than there are answers. And we have to give the justice system time to work through it all. But the mistakes that he made, mistakes that were clear that this was not someone who was a well-seasoned killer. His car, let's start with that. The car had been seen in and around the area, and eyewitnesses had reported to the police during their canvasses of a car, same make, model, and color, that had been seen in the area. Car parked on the street, single male passenger in the car, behind the wheel of the car, never got out, nobody ever gets in. It just pulls up and waits in different locations for long periods of time. Was he stalking these actual students and that's why he was in the area? Or was he watching another home altogether? Another home, but this one with all female students. Because the home to the direct left of this place, the direct right and above, and directly across the actual parking lot are all females, no males. Was he targeting one of them and got spooked off and decided to commit this? That would be pure speculation on my part and anyone else's part onto why he actually committed this murder. Additional mistakes that he made was leaving the actual tracks in and out of the actual apartment. Believe me, the police have that evidence. They were able to not only photograph and could be seen placing actual markers outside of the home and taking footprint impressions from outside the home, but they've noted and they took photographs of smudges on mirrors, sliding glass doors, and entryways into the apartment home there where the college students lived. And then lastly, the biggest mistake of them all is the sheath for the knife that he actually would use, allegedly use. Because again, we know that he is innocent until proven guilty. But right now, he is allegedly to have committed these murders. The sheath itself could have been put on a belt strap and attached to him so he would have left it behind. But he didn't. For some reason, he didn't put the knife sheath on his belt loop. And on that actual belt loop was a partial DNA profile from the button itself, where he had opened and closed it and left trace evidence of his DNA behind. Which, once he was brought through the system, and they had a pretty good idea that it was him, because early on, don't forget, a lot of people were blaming the police department. They said the Moscow police department is screwing this case up. They're making a travesty of it. The families came out in front of the media and said they're doing nothing. They're making mistakes. Why hasn't this happened? And understandably, unless you've ever had to live through something like this, you will never, ever understand exactly how that family felt that day and every day going forward, even today. Their hearts were broken. Everything was in confusion. Nothing made sense. Why our loved one? Why our daughter? Why our son? Why did this happen to our daughter's friends? You can't make sense of it. You go into a state of panic. And every day, all you want is the pain to go away, for it to get better. So they lashed out at the police department. But early on, the Moscow police department knew right then that this was bigger than something that they could handle. And they had reached out to the state and federal authorities to come in and help them with this case. And we probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the fact that the Moscow Police Department called in others and said, look, we can't handle this case. We cannot do this on our own. And that was a smart thing to do. And we are here today because they did that. But the YSTR, the partial DNA profile, is important because it only follows the lineage, the DNA ancestry of the father of the actual man himself. So Bryan's father, grandfather, great-grandfather, it follows that side of the family, and the Y chromosome only. And then his father had discarded actual trash with his DNA profile on it. And I've seen it in the news. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people are calling out, no, the police can't do that. They can't take something out of your trash can and test it for DNA. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the United States Supreme Court has already ruled on this 3 times, that anything that has been discarded by you, a cigarette butt, a paper cup that you may have drank out of, and things that you've thrown into your private trash can, the moment you discard the item, you have no expectation of privacy. You have discarded it. It is now in the free domain. So for those out there who think that the police overstepped their bounds to collect that item, to get the DNA of his father off of it, are wrong. But it's a match. And now they will do a complete DNA analysis of his DNA to see if it matches the sheath and other items or trace evidence that he may have left behind. Because there is no such thing as the perfect murder. Next, I want to touch on something that a lot of people and society as a whole love to throw around whenever something like this, a case like this, a senseless, tragic murder of an innocent individual, in this case, 4 innocent people, happens, that the person who did it must be a sociopath or a psychopath, or at the very least, a narcissist. That's what this person is. We want to label them. We want to put them in a box. So it makes us feel better that we've put them someplace where we can actually look at and say, this is who they are, and this is why they did it. Because they are this, they are that. Ladies and gentlemen, as this case goes forward and the trial and everything else develops, I want you to keep this in mind. No one worth a grain of salt in the field of psychotherapy, therapy, clinical psychology, no one in that field will ever label this man a sociopath, a psychopath, or a narcissist unless they have actually sat down and had multiple conversations with the individual. You can't diagnose someone with just one interview, one conversation. You must have multiples to actually come up with any diagnosis like that. A lot of people have been commenting online that Bryan Kohberger is a budding serial killer, that he's a Ted Bundy-esque kind of killer. No, not even close. Bryan is a wallflower, socially awkward, always wanted to make sure that everybody around him knew that he was the smartest man in the room. He always wanted to be the first one to solve the problem in class. So they always wanted to know. But lastly, a lot of people have pondered on the internet, is Bryan a serial killer, a Ted Bundy-esque type of killer? Well, the answer to that, ladies and gentlemen, is emphatically no. No, see, Ted Bundy had a lot more going for him other than the fact that he was a serial killer. Ted Bundy, you may not think that he's a handsome man now or ever, but Ted Bundy, in his time, was at the top of his game. He was charming. He could talk people into everything. And he could convince people that he never would harm a fly. That's what Ted Bundy was. Number one, a charmer, a good-looking, well put together individual. And this is why he got away with his crime spree for so long. Bryan Kohberger, awkward, shy, someone that when you were able to actually get him to communicate, socialize, was a wallflower. He didn't know how to talk to other males, let alone how to communicate with women effectively. He was so awkward that most people kind of took pity on him. That here's this grad student who doesn't have the ability to even try to enjoy the best part of college. Weekends, when they had nothing to study, no term papers due coming up, he stayed by himself. Again, those that knew him from school said that passing in the hallway, you'd say hello to him, he'd look down at the floor, never making eye contact, but he would mumble, "Hi," as he walked by. That's the kind of person he is. No, he's not a serial killer, nor is he a Bundy-esque type of killer. We will never know truly why he did what he did. But we do know right now is there's nobody else that has been linked to this. And I will now read you the actual eyewitness statement from the one roommate who lived when describing the individual and what she heard. I woke up and I looked out down the hallway. I saw a man walking towards me, tall, slender, but athletic build, with bushy eyebrows. A face mask covered his face, all but his eyes. I walked back into my room, closed the door, and locked it. Take a look at Bryan. It matches him. But of course, it also matches 10,000 other people in the same area. But 10,000 other people didn't leave their DNA